Why do you think that the delegates enumerated powers of Congress but did not enumerate the powers of the executive and judicial branches in the same detail?
Well, under the Articles of Confederation, there was no executive. So while they were debating at the Philadelphia Convention, the delegates gave the legislature many more powers than are in the Constitution today. And they actually thought that the executive would become an errand boy to Congress because of the vast amount of power the legislative branch had. And since there was no experience under an executive, it was very hard for them to make decisions about the executive.
And it was thought to be that George Washington would be the first president of the United States, so they kind of gave him a little more power, and they trusted George Washington, and they kind of allowed him to kind of feel it out and get the feel for the executive, and they knew they trusted him, and he wouldn't be like an errand boy for Congress.
And that argument and this led to the argument of the anti-federalists. What happens when George Washington isn't in power? What happens when General Slushington is in office? What happens when there's a president who would abuse his powers? Is this vagueness of what he can do, is that a bad thing?
With the judicial branch, I think it was, again, because under the Articles of Confederation, they had this sort of single branch of government. Yet in the Articles of Confederation, they did hint at the creation of a Supreme Court of Appeals for certain situations, for like state conflicts. And again, I think they just continued with following that since, but put in a little further detail of that when they should be a Court of Appeals and when they should have original jurisdiction. So I think they put in some details, but left a little things more broad just because they were not quite sure when things, because they had to compromise with everyone.
The framers were not creating this out of thin air. They all came out of a British system and understood parliamentary and parliamentary democracy and the benefits and the problems of that. How did the system that they developed differ from the parliamentary system in terms of the shared and balance of powers?
In the parliamentary system under England, the House of Lords actually served as the judiciary in the English system, and that was something that the delegates knew they didn't want, because in Federalist 43, Madison writes that the accumulation of all powers, executive, judicial, and legislative, can be pronounced the very definition of tyranny, and that was something that they did not want.
I think he meant Federalist Paper 47. And actually, very recently, they sort of, looking back at this, the parliamentary system and having the House of Lords being that, being the Court of Appeals, just recently, last fall, they changed that and made that they are now establishing a Supreme Court, so there isn't that conflict of separations of power.
Thank you.
But the parliamentary system can be a much more efficient system. And just looking at our recent healthcare debate, if we had a parliamentary system, maybe it wouldn't have taken us over a year to get to an answer on that particular debate. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that sometimes it would be a good thing for things to move on a little faster, because like there are wars and things happen that action needs to be taken. But I think this is what the executive, broad executive powers are here for. Like the presidents often step up during times of war to make things move faster, like how President Lincoln issued an Emancipation Proclamation to move along the war and help our government overcome obstacles when they needed it.
In Federalist State, it states that war is usually causes the inevitable increase of executive power at the expense of the legislature, sort of saying that in times of crisis, it is necessary for the executive power to take more action.
And I think getting back to the original question, that the parliamentary system would pass this large legislation like healthcare more quickly and efficiently. I think in times you do need a more prolonged deliberation to allow good laws, more refined laws to be passed, rather than quick laws that would, in the end, come back to hurt the Congress that had passed them.
Yes, in Article 1, Section 7, we create the bicameral system in our Congress to create this sort of deliberative process and checks and balances, which is essential to our government system to allow no one branch to become overpowerful. And in Federalist 51, it says that the legislative branch in a republic will predominate, and so therefore it needs to be split.
Why has the balancing of powers between national and state governments remained so controversial today?
It leads back to when we first came together as a nation, and even in the Declaration of Independence, it stated that we will become the separate sovereign states, and sovereign states, and so it's sort of that we're becoming sovereign, but we're still separate states. And then under the Articles of Confederation, we were still distinct states, and when we were creating the Constitution, that was the big debate of whether how much power should the states have and how much power should the national government have.
Yeah, the Articles of Confederation gave the states a lot more power, and then the Constitution kind of took it back, and now today still there's like arguing like state powers like the healthcare. Some states are like arguing that they're going to nullify it, and they think that should be left up to the states, but the national government says like it's our power and we should have the power to do that.